seems that I got good feedback on the video, how to defend punches. And that video was filmed in a format where I just off the rip explained the topic. And I want to do that again today with counterpunching. Now, anybody that's been into boxing for a certain amount of time, whether they're a spectator or they've trained it or have some experience, they understand that counterpunching is when you throw a punch and the other person counters it, or they throw a punch and you counters it. So a lot of times it's understood that whenever you counterpunch, it's going off of whatever your opponent is presenting you. But the truth is that to understand counterpunching in that way is sort of like surface level. And from what I've seen as boxing and martial arts gets more popular, I think that boxing with counterpunching is almost being taught a little bit wrong. And let me elaborate. So the thing is you have to understand is that when we train in the gym, we learn how to give a good counter for each strike. For example, if someone throws a jab at us, we learn to catch the jab and counter with our own jab. Or we catch the jab and we counter with a jab cross. If someone throws a left hook at us, we'll learn how to, cover it and come back with our own left hook. Or weave it and roll it and come back with some stuff. But what you need to understand is that normally when you box or spar or MMA, Muay Thai, whatever combat sport, a lot of times people are very fast with their hands, and you can't always expect to have the reaction time or even the ability to read those punches that you're just gonna magically move out of the way and be able to counter them. So to understand counterpunching, you first need to understand the concept of exchanges in fights and how exchanges actually work. So to understand the basics, it's that when you have two people in the ring or in the octagon and they're in orbit, whenever they meet each other, right away, that alone is an exchange. Now, if someone were to step in, let's say, from out of range and throw a jab, land the jab, and step out, you could almost think of that in an exchange where one person went first, they landed their shot, and they got out of distance and disengaged. And that's the end of that exchange. They got one over the other guy. However, let's say that the other person were to catch it on the guard and come back with their own punches or combinations. Now it's like one person went first and initiated, the other person defended and countered. So basically, person A went first, person B went second, person A initiated, person B responded. But as we know, exchanges can get very complicated because person A that initiated, after they throw that jab, it gets countered, they bring the hand back, they could come with some of their own stuff. And in that situation, they're going third. And a lot of times, if you're very smooth, you can do what's called countering the counter, which is where, let's say I throw a jab, my opponent, parries it, shoots his own jab, but then I slip his jab and come with the right. That would be countering the counter. And although a lot of times people attribute that ability to reaction and reading punches and experience, the truth is it's a little more nuanced than that. And I'll explain the intricacies of it. So understand that when you're waiting for an opponent to go first, there's a lot of feints that they're throwing. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of anxiety. It's hard to just constantly be in the mode of anticipating what they're going to do. So when you see guys like Roy Jones and Anderson Silva, or anybody with a hands down style, for example, understand that when a guy drops his hands, it's an invitation. Now, why would he want to invite the opponent to try to hit him where he's vulnerable? It's because you're allowing for this thing to take place where you're going to know when this punch is coming. If I'm in a good, defensive guard and I have tight defense, you're going to have to open me up. I don't know necessarily when you're going to go. You might be feinting. You might be, changing direction. There's a lot to sort of track while also anticipating things coming at my face. But if I can sort of invite you, I can make you throw. It's also the similar concept to countering the jab, because a lot of times the best counterpunchers, despite leaving traps and stuff like that, they initiate the exchange with their jab, because it's like this. If I can touch a guy's guard with my jab and then he counters and throws something, I can now, as the counterpuncher, counter his counter. So now by me initiating, knowing he's going to counter, I know now that this is when the punch is going to come. See, if I'm on the outside, and every time I step in, I land my jab, that's perfect. If your jab is landing, just keep landing. But as the fight goes on or the sparring goes on, they're gonna look to counter your jab. So as you jab, what's gonna happen is they're going to show their preferred way to counter the jab. So let's say that preferred counter is, take it on the gloves and throw a right cross. You now know that if you throw that jab, maybe get your slip ready to anticipate their cross. So that would look something like this. I would jab, you throw the cross at me, I'd slip, come back with my left hook. Because what's going on is if you throw a cross at me, I may not have the skill and reaction time to just magically slip. But if I can throw a jab at you and you counter this jab, now I've basically drawn out your counter. Except a lot of times smart fighters will know this. So what they'll do is they'll try to diversify their counters. They won't want to use the same counter all the time. So for example, if we're boxing and every time you throw the jab at me, I parry, jab, you're gonna pick up on that. So what I can do is, as the person that's going second all the time, is I can, pull instead. I could slip to the outside of the inside. I could just raise a high guard and counter back. There's ways you can mix up. If every time a guy comes at you with combinations, you can try to stay in the pocket and defend. You can empty the space and move back. Or you can crash distance. And it's not so much about what defense you're using, but the idea that a person that's a good counterpuncher, they're not just gonna wait for you all day. They're gonna actually press the action to draw out your counters. So what you want to do as the person that's being baited for their counter is that you want to just mix it up, not always do the same different counter every time, right? So that's the nature of most exchanges. It's usually one person will initiate, the other person will respond, and the person that initiated will basically respond to the response. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes you step in with the jab, you get hit. That guy got the better of that exchange. Sometimes you step in, let's say jab cross, he takes on his guard, he fires back, but you fire back, you land on the way out. You got that exchange. There's different ways the exchanges can pan out. It's that a lot of times you'll hear the expression lucky punch. The truth is, when you study and break down how exchanges pan out and the different angles and, combinations of ways that guys can counter certain strikes, you realize it's not as random as people say. So the first thing to understand with counterpunching, and I'll do my best explaining this with just myself, but I'm actually glad that I can face you. So if I had my guard up, right, and let's say you threw a looping punch from this side, I can either choose to yield to your power by basically moving away from the power to diminish it, or I can choose to step in and basically smother it. Or I can choose to stay firm, not move my hips, and take it on my guard. Now, what are the pros and cons of these different methods? If you're a very heavy puncher, if I sort of roll with the power, I can then come back with my own shot. However, in the time that your hip turns to throw the strike that I'm yielding to, now your hip is also going to be turning as I throw. So you can then yield to me. And it becomes like a lot of times you'll see that in UFC. Once two guys start swinging at each other at the same cadence, ooh, that's a dangerous game. Someone's just gonna get caught on the off swing. Now, if you crash distance, you may like this distance to work from, except if a guy's also a good inside fighter, you might not wanna give him what he wants because he may come long, you get in tight, but he likes that and he works from there. Or you can do what someone like Canelo's very good at, where what he'll do is he'll stay firm, he'll take the shot on his guard so that now he's inside of your hip turn and he'll throw his punch from there. So he'll raise the high guard, throw the shot. Raise the high guard, throw the shot. None of these methods are superior to the other. They're just options. What you can always do is you can always mix hand defense with moving back. I can parry, but I can also parry moving back. I can raise my arm to block, but I can also sort of just high block and move back. There's many ways to defend and many options. But not to get away from the main point is that with counterpunching, understand it's not just you waiting. A lot of times, if you yourself want to be the counterpuncher, you need to initiate. except here's the trick too. As the one initiating, the same way the person on the receiving end doesn't want to use the same defense all the time, you also don't want to always use the same way of attack all the time because now you're always showing the same thing. So for instance, usually the jab to draw out their counter is called probing. But what you can do is you can jab normal, you can jab to the body, you can jab with your head off the center line to avoid their straight shots. You can, move your hips off the center line and throw. But what you also can do is you can feint. So if they know that I like the jab or the double jab, I can mix a series of feints. And what that does is it serves as the thing that draws out their counter. You know what I mean? So instead of me putting myself in harm's way for them to counter this position right here, I'll just from right here feint. And now I'm getting them to have to bite on my feint and possibly even show what their preferred counter is. So if I have a good jab going and this guy's like, all right, next time Stefan throws the jab, I'm dipping my head and coming over the top. I can now feint and I might get him to go like this. And he might show his preferred counter. Now I got that data. Now I can say, okay, he's looking to throw the overhand. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna feint the jab, throw the cross, and I'm just gonna roll preemptively and let the punch go over my head. There's one time I was sparring on a Saturday where a lot of times the guy liked to counter me with a left hook. So what I would do is I would throw my jab and I'd quickly roll under my own jab. And what would happen is his hand would go right above my head. So it would look something like this. And a lot of guys were like, oh, you got great reaction. And it's like, no, I don't have good reaction. He showed me that he's trying to do this check left hook to me every time I jab. So what I'm gonna do is instead of jabbing and stepping back, I'm gonna jab and just roll under preemptively. It's like built-in defense because I know now what he's going to do because he was poor at diversifying his counters. But then on my end is where I was like, okay, well, if he likes the left hook, maybe I'll just jab, but then also throw that cross and quickly get this hand back up and sort of take the left hook on the hand while throwing my right cross, right? So you learn to adjust to basically try to end up on the better receiving end of an exchange. So there's a lot to counterpunching and there's so many different counters out there, but I really just wanted to try to bring a general focus to the idea that somebody goes first, somebody responds and goes second, and then the person that went first can respond and go third, and it can even go on and on and on. So what your homework can be is take a fight where you feel it was a very back and forth battle and hit the pause button and try to break down in this fight, who initiated in this one exchange, who countered, who got the better of the exchange. And I'll be honest with you, you're gonna find that a lot of times, the guys that tend to initiate the exchanges, on average, they kind of tend to get more exchanges in their favor. And that's because a lot of times, if you're the one going first, it's not that you're so in control of what the outcome will be of the exchange, but it's that you're pressing the action. They're gonna have to sort of like respond to whatever you're doing unless they really got your number, which is where you see really beautiful simultaneous counters where, guys will sort of like use a shoulder roll off the cross and roll the hand over, or they'll sort of pull and hit the guy, like great, Floyd Mayweather, Roy Jones type of people, Anderson Silva type of stuff. Now, the last thing I'll say, and this is also very important, is that I'm only talking about the timing of counters where one guy goes first, the other receives his shot and goes second. But there's also what they call the simultaneous counter. And that's where you go to throw a punch and you're getting cracked as you're punching. And from your end, you as the guy going first, you don't want that happening. But if the other guy's going first, you do want to catch him with that. And usually the way guys will do this is if someone's trying to hit me with a straight shot, like a jab or a cross, anything that goes straight down the middle, a lot of guys will tend to move their head off the center line while throwing their own punch in that slot. And a lot of times, that's like the checkmate in boxing. That's like perfect timing. Like if you get a simultaneous counter knockout, there's really no greater achievement in a fight, in my opinion. I believe that it's not that it's so rare, but it is decently rare because a lot of times the best counterpunchers do respond to something thrown at them. to truly, if a guy, has a tendency to maybe drop a hand during a punch and you're able to, let's say, capitalize and hit that guy as he throws that punch, it's impeccable timing. Because the thing is, a lot of times you get knocked out by what you're not expecting. And if you hit a guy while they're punching, there's no better time to sort of hit them with that element of surprise. And that's why a lot of times guys get knocked out in exchanges and during exchanges, because when they're on offense, their brain is just not thinking about getting hit. Versus if they're on the receiving end of a lot of punishment and now they're shelling up and they're actually hanging in there because their brain is only thinking defense, roll with the punches, yield with the power. A lot of times you're throwing big shots. Boom, you are not ready for that. So that's why what you want to do is, to avoid getting simultaneously countered, is tight defense, everything where it needs to be, shoulder to the chin, arm, elbow covering the body, hand up, that sort of thing. Get in the mirror, practice your tight defense. But also, which a lot of coaches won't tell you this, but I'll tell you it now from my experience, is that you should go in the mirror and sometime on your own time, have a solid game plan for basically, if any punch you throw, if they respond with a certain punch, what would you do in that situation? So for me, if I throw a jab, and if you parry it and throw your own jab, I'm gonna look to parry. If I jab and you throw your own cross, I'm gonna look to slip left hook. If I jab and you throw a shot over the top, I'm gonna lift my elbow or I'm gonna get back. If you throw a left hook, I'm gonna bring my hand back. If you throw a long left hook, I might weave under, or the other side. Or if you throw a body shot off of this, I might turn and get my hand on your head. Or I might just try to bring that elbow back. And then you go to the cross. You think, okay, if I throw a cross and he throws his own cross, I'm gonna quickly bail this way and slip. If I throw a cross and he throws a jab, I'm gonna slip. If I throw a cross and he comes under, I'm maybe gonna turn. So not that you're gonna be able to go over every single type of simultaneously counter, and that you're going to be able to leave no stones unturned and just be like the Matrix or like Kato from the Green Hornet or something. But it's good to actually explore those and think to yourself, if I, let's say, did throw a left hook and they simultaneously throw a left hook, what would I do? I would try to really keep this tight. Like, it's just good to sort of explore these different outcomes so that a lot of these sort of lucky punch random happenings, they don't seem as random anymore, because at some point in your training, you did consider. And that's why what you should do is, when you shadow box, is mix in defense. You should jab, cross, defend, or jab, cross, slip, counter, or jab, cross, slip the other way. You want to try to blend your defense with your offense so that you're not only really good at defense and really good at offense, but you're exploring how to be very, very good at exchanges. And the truth is, a lot of times in a fight, because we don't really go off a tit for tat point system and it's judged, a lot of times whoever wins the most exchanges visibly tends to get the judge's decision. So I'll leave you with that, guys. Train hard, try this stuff out.